The locals still speak of the summer heat of 1855 as if it were alive, an ugly, swollen thing that crawled through the cane fields and into the bones of anyone unfortunate enough to live near the Devereaux plantation. That heat did not shimmer, it hung, choking and sticky, turning the very air into something that felt like a warning. Even the crows refused to perch on the roof of the abandoned mansion, though no one could say why. Animals knew things. They always did. Across the fields, in a crooked cabin with a half-collapsed roof and walls stitched together by old hand-me-down boards scavenged from other ruins, lived the woman they whispered about. Her name had been stripped from her long ago, replaced with whatever the master saw fit, but among the others she was simply known as Mara. Her belly was swollen, round and firm as a drum, the child inside shifting whenever the world grew too quiet. Even the midwives felt something strange when they touched her stomach. The baby kicked hard, too hard for a child not yet born. Sometimes the movements felt as if the child pressed back, resisting the hands that examined its mother. Mara felt it too, felt it every night, felt it especially when the overseer came near. Jonas Reddick was known for cruelty the same way a rattlesnake was known for its bite, it was simply what he was. A tall, raw-boned white man with a sun-scorched face and small, yellowish eyes that flickered constantly, as if searching for an opportunity to hurt something. His boots left deep cuts in the dirt, and his belt, thick leather with a brass buckle, was never far from his hands. A man like him wasn't feared for his strength but for the fact that harming others seemed to give him energy, like it fed him. He had taken a particular interest in Mara the moment the master made her work in the fields again, belly or no belly. Jonas watched her like a wolf pacing around a wounded doe. He watched how slowly she moved, how fragile she looked, how alone she was, and that look in his eyes made the others tense, made them whisper warnings, made them keep her close whenever they could. But late one night, after most had collapsed from exhaustion and the moon floated like a pale, disinterested eye in a starless sky, Jonas walked into her cabin without knocking. The rope that held the door shut snapped as if expecting him. Mara had been half asleep when she heard it. Her hand instinctively covered her belly, and the baby inside pressed back as if sensing her fear. Jonas stepped inside, boots tracking mud, breath thick with the smell of whiskey and something metallic. She could not move. The darkness inside the cabin seemed to curl around her, as if holding her still. He leaned close, and the floor beneath him creaked in protest. His hand reached out again, slow, deliberate, greedy. But something inside Mara shifted. Her back straightened. The oppressive heat in the room suddenly changed direction, lifting instead of sinking. A faint rustling sound, like corn stalks bowing in a storm, filled the air even though no wind touched the cabin. "Touch me again," she whispered, her voice deepening, thickening, as if someone else spoke through her. "Touch me again, and die." Her eyes were open, but Jonas knew that something else was staring out from behind them. Something older, something patient, something that did not fear him. For the first time in his life, Jonas froze. No one ever spoke to him that way. No one ever warned him. And certainly no pregnant slave woman was allowed to threaten him. His face twisted in anger immediately, but he could not move forward, not even to lift his hand. Something pressed against his chest, not physically, but from within, like a cold palm gripping his heart. The lantern flame dimmed, then flared bright white. He stumbled back, shoving himself out the door with enough force to crash into the dirt. He scrambled to his feet, breath ragged, his pride burning hotter than the summer night. He wanted to storm back inside, to drag her out, to punish her so brutally her screams would echo through the cane fields until morning. But he couldn't. Even his boots refused to carry him toward the cabin. Behind him, the door rustled shut without anyone touching it. Jonas walked away that night trembling with a rage he had never known. Rage, and fear. He told no one what happened, but by morning the others had already sensed something. They saw how he avoided Mara's cabin, how he flinched when she passed by, how his lips tightened at the memory of her voice, her warning, her impossible calm. Something had changed, but the plantation itself began changing too. Dogs refused to go near the abandoned mansion at the edge of the estate, an old white-pillared structure that had once been a symbol of southern wealth but now sagged with rot. Windows cracked, roof tiles fell, vines clawed their way up the walls. People said they heard whispers from inside at night, as if someone were wandering its halls even though no one lived there. And 3 days after Mara's warning, on a night when the air pressed down like a wet blanket and the sky glowed red through the clouds, Jonas Reddick, overseer, tormentor, coward, marched toward that mansion carrying a lantern and a jug of bourbon. He had decided to reclaim his pride. If he couldn't punish her directly, he would prove to himself, and everyone else, that he was still fearless. He would go inside the mansion alone. Go upstairs, stand in the room where the master's wife had died screaming, sit in the rocking chair that creaked when no wind blew, maybe even sleep there until morning. He shouted into the night that anyone who doubted him would see what a man truly was. His voice echoed. No one answered. Most of the enslaved people stayed inside their cabins, whispering prayers for him, not out of compassion, but because they feared what might happen to the rest of them if something unnatural occurred. The mansion door opened on its own when Jonas approached. He didn't notice. He was too drunk, too angry, too determined to stamp out the fear creeping beneath his ribs. He lifted his lantern, stepped inside, and shouted into the darkness. "Ain't no spirit gonna scare me." But something heard him. Something stirred awake. Outside, Mara woke from her sleep with a gasp, clutching her belly. The baby kicked, once, twice, then pressed hard, as if trying to break free. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Sweat rolled down her temples. The walls of her cabin rattled without wind. Her eyes widened, reflecting a faint glow from the direction of the mansion. She whispered, barely audible, "It's begun." And then the night lit up. First with a small, flickering light. Then brighter still, until flames erupted from the mansion as if the building itself were exhaling fire. No screams were heard, just the hungry roar of burning wood. By the time the others ran out, barefoot and terrified, the mansion was engulfed. The pillars collapsed inward. Smoke billowed into the sky in long, black ribbons. The heat was violent, unnatural, so intense that no one could get close. Jonas Reddick never walked out. All that remained of him by morning was a blackened patch on the floor where he had stood, boots fused to the boards, lantern melted into a puddle of copper, bones cracked from inside as if they had burst. No one could explain it. No one tried. But when the master arrived, pale and trembling, Mara stepped out of her cabin slowly, the faintest smile on her lips. Her belly shifted. Something inside it rolled gently, almost content. She whispered only once. It warned him. The morning after the fire carried a silence so heavy it bent the backs of everyone who walked across the fields. Smoke still curled like thin, dying fingers from the black skeleton of the Devereaux mansion. Nothing remained of its once grand pillars except piles of charred ash that the wind refused to scatter, as if even nature feared disturbing what had happened there. No birds sang, no insects hummed. The plantation felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something else to break. The master, Alden Devereaux, rode out on his pale horse with the stiff posture of a man who had been awake all night and regretted closing his eyes even once. His face twitched at every creak of the saddle, every gust of wind, every faint scent of burnt flesh that drifted up from the ruins. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into scorched soil that still radiated heat. Jonas Reddick had been many things, cruel, reckless, often drunk, but he had also been loyal to the master's will, a man who carried out punishments so Alden never dirtied his own hands. Losing Jonas was an inconvenience. Losing him in such a way, in a fire that rose from nowhere, in a house no one entered, was something else. Something that cracked the master's carefully built sense of control. "Find out what happened," he ordered, voice tight as rope. No one moved. Not a single enslaved man or woman dared step forward. The ruins steamed as if something still breathed inside them. Alden repeated the command, louder, angrier, his voice breaking. But still no one stepped forward. Fear, real fear, had settled across the plantation like a thick fog. That was when Mara appeared. She walked slower than usual, one hand under her swollen belly, the other resting at her side. Her feet were bare but clean, as though the dirt refused to cling to her. Her eyes were dark, unreadable, and when she stopped behind the others, they stepped aside instinctively, forming a small, trembling path without meaning to. The master noticed. His jaw tightened. He had heard the whispers, about her warning, about Jonas avoiding her for days afterward, about her waking just before the fire began, but he dismissed such things. Superstition, stories, the nonsense of desperate people. And yet, Alden could feel something shift in the air as she approached. Something colder than the breeze that threaded through the cane. Something unnatural. Mara didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply looked at the ruins, and the flames inside the house suddenly seemed less like an accident and more like an answer. "You," Alden said sharply. "You were the last one to speak to Jonas. What did you tell him?" Mara's gaze slid from the mansion to the master. Her voice came out gentle, calm, so calm it made the others step back another inch. The truth, she said. That he should not touch me. Alden's nostrils flared. And why? He asked, trying to keep the quiver out of his words. Should a woman like you threaten a man like him? Mara tilted her head. The baby pressed against her ribs, and she inhaled sharply but did not flinch. I warned him, she said. Warnings are not threats. The master stepped closer. Did you set that fire? For the first time, a faint, almost tender smile touched her lips. I didn't need to. The silence that followed pressed on everyone like a weight. Alden felt sweat gather beneath his collar. He took in her stomach, round, unnatural in its firmness, almost shifting under the cloth as if the child inside listened. Something about the way Mara held herself frightened him in a way he refused to admit. You're lying, he said. Someone lit that fire. Jonas didn't burn himself alive. No, Mara whispered. He didn't. Alden stepped back as if he'd been struck. The others watched, breath caught in their throats, waiting to see if the master would raise his hand, shout, punish, assert dominance. But Alden felt something he hadn't felt since childhood, dread. He spun on his heel and stormed back toward the big house, barking orders at the overseer in training, a boy barely old enough to shave. Watch her, he growled. Don't let her out of your sight. The boy nodded shakily, but Mara didn't watch him. She watched the sky. A thin gray cloud curled overhead, spinning slowly as if someone traced circles in the air. And again, beneath her hand, the baby pressed outward, slow, deliberate. Almost like a response. That evening, the prayers began. Old Lila, the midwife who had helped birth more children than anyone could count, came to Mara's cabin with trembling hands. She knelt beside the bed, touching Mara's belly with the same caution one would use touching a sleeping snake. Child, Lila whispered, something's forming around you. I don't know what it is, but the air's turning wrong. Mara's eyes softened. It's been wrong, she murmured. For a long time. You told him he'd die if he touched you. I knew it, Mara said. I felt it deep. Felt what? Lila whispered. Mara looked toward the window. The night outside was too quiet. The cicadas, the crickets, the frogs, all silent. As if the world waited. The child, Mara said slowly. It knows. Lila recoiled. Knows. Baby ain't even born yet. Mara shook her head gently. Not with its mind, she whispered. With something else. A long, trembling breath escaped the midwife's lips. You carrying something powerful. Something that scares even the dead. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, as she lay awake, her cabin trembling ever so gently, she felt the air thicken around her again. Felt the floorboards pulse. Felt the darkness stretch and curl like a living thing. And somewhere across the field, in the ruins of the mansion, something moved. Not a person, not an animal, something else. Something that had woken the moment Jonas died. Something that had begun following the rhythm of Mara's heartbeat. At midnight, every window on the plantation cracked at the same time. Not shattered, cracked, thin, perfect lines across every pane. The master jolted awake. The animals screamed. The overseer boy ran from cabin to cabin shouting panic. But Mara only sat up slowly, palm pressed against her belly, feeling the warmth radiating outward. The child inside her rolled once, twice, and then went still. Waiting. The house ruins flickered red again, though no fire burned. Mara whispered into the darkness. It's not finished. And for the first time, the darkness whispered back. Say part 3 when you want the next chapter. The cracking of every window on the plantation should have been impossible, yet the sound had come all at once, sharp, delicate, perfectly synchronized like the snapping of hundreds of thin bones. The master spent the hours before dawn pacing the porch of the big house, lantern trembling in his hand, eyes darting constantly toward the dark silhouette of the ruined mansion. Every time the wind shifted, he flinched as though expecting to see Jonas walking out of the ashes, skin melted, boots fused, eyes hollowed out. But no one came, nothing moved, nothing dared. The place had gone still, unnaturally still, as if even the insects avoided breathing in that direction. Inside her cabin, Mara hadn't slept at all. She sat upright, one hand resting under her belly, the other gripping the edge of the cot. The baby had gone quiet after the windows cracked. Not asleep, not resting, listening, feeling. The stillness inside her felt alive with pressure, like the air before a storm, building towards something that had no name. When dawn finally smeared the horizon with pale, sickly light, she rose and stepped outside. The moment her bare feet touched the dirt, the ground pulsed, just once, like a heartbeat. She felt it, so did the others. Men and women froze where they stood, eyes wide, breath caught in their throats. Every head turned toward Mara, not because she had done anything, not because she said a word, but because something had shifted around her, something they could all feel, something that pressed down on the world like a heavy hand. Even Alden noticed it. He stared down from the porch, squinting in confusion, unable to explain why the sight of one woman standing in morning light made the hairs on his arms rise. He wanted to shout again, to demand answers, to accuse someone, anyone, of witchcraft or sabotage or rebellion. But he didn't. Fear clogged his throat too tightly. He watched as Mara placed one hand on her belly and the child stirred in a way that made the skin ripple visibly, as though a hand inside pushed outward. The overseer boy standing nearby stumbled back so fast he nearly tripped. Mara's eyes, dark and calm, lifted toward the mansion ruins. Smoke no longer rose from the ash. Instead, a faint shimmer, almost like heat but colder, wavered 6 feet above the ground, bending the air into vague shapes that vanished when stared at too directly. Alden swallowed hard. "Bring her to the big house," he muttered, voice cracking. "Now." But no one moved. The boy he'd ordered the night before stared at him with wide eyes, trembling so violently the lantern in his hand clattered against his knee. Even the strongest field hands hesitated, glancing at each other, uncertain whether approaching her would be a violation of something they didn't understand. The wind picked up suddenly, swirling dust around Mara's feet. Her dress fluttered, but her body remained perfectly still. Her eyes finally left the mansion and shifted toward the master. Everyone watched. The world held its breath. She began walking, not toward the big house but toward the old well that sat between the cabins and the fields. It was a deep, stone-lined well that had been sealed for years after a child fell into it and was never found. The wooden lid had rotted through, leaving the hole open, dark and bottomless. The kind of place that carried echoes even when nothing moved within it. Mara stopped beside it. The others followed at a distance, unwilling to get too close but unable to look away. The wind died. The air thickened. She placed both hands on the edge of the well and leaned slightly over it. The quiet was so complete that even the master stopped speaking. Everyone watched her as if something inside the earth was calling her name. Then she whispered, not loud enough to spread, but quiet enough that only the well could hear. The words slipped from her lips like smoke. None of the others understood them. Not Lila, not the men beside her, not even the master who strained to hear. But the well understood. A single, low vibration rose from its depths, so deep it wasn't heard but felt, buzzing through bone and skin. Several people staggered back, clutching their arms and necks. The vibration grew stronger, then stronger. The stones around the well began to tremble, flakes of dirt falling inward. The master shouted, stepping forward, but he stopped abruptly when Mara straightened and turned toward him. Her eyes had changed, not the color, not the shape, the stillness, the depth. It was like staring into dark water that hid something just beneath the surface. She took one step away from the well. The ground beneath her seemed to harden, pulling into place with each footfall, as if the earth wanted to carry her instead of resisting her weight. The master forced himself forward, fists trembling, breath quick. "Enough," he rasped. "You've done something. You're summoning something. This ends now." She didn't answer him. She didn't need to. The well answered for her. From deep below, something exhaled. Not air, heat, scorching, unnatural heat, the kind that came from the mansion the night Jonas died. The dirt around the well smoked. The stones glowed faintly, as though remembering fire. Several people screamed and fled. Alden stumbled back, horror twisting his features. Stop her, stop her. But no one moved. The earth rumbled again, louder. A sharp crack split the stones around the well, sending dust and shriveled roots outward. A hot breeze curled around Mara's ankles like welcoming hands. The baby inside her shifted violently, lifting her dress slightly with the force of its movement. Mara closed her eyes. The heat rose. The crack widened, and in the silence between breaths, something whispered her name from the depths, slow, deliberate, familiar. She whispered back, and the plantation trembled. The whisper from the well did not echo. It pulsed, a low thrum that slipped under the skin of everyone who stood nearby. It felt like a heartbeat, but not a human one, too slow, too heavy, too ancient to belong to anything that should have been breathing. The ground rippled in a wide circle around Mara's feet, the soil rising and falling as if something beneath it stirred. Those who had not fled now dropped to their knees, hands pressed to their ears even though the sound wasn't loud. It wasn't sound at all, it was presence. It wrapped around them like thick, invisible rope, squeezing their lungs, slowing their hearts, making their eyes sting until tears streaked their cheeks. Alden Devereaux stumbled backward, boots sliding in the dirt, face pale as milk. He had seen death, sickness, drought, storms that crushed entire rows of cane, but never this. Never anything that made the earth breathe. Someone fetch the priest, he choked out, though he knew the nearest church was miles away and no holy man would dare step foot on a plantation where the ground itself rebelled. His voice cracked again, "Stop her." But Mara wasn't moving. She stood perfectly still beside the well, one hand on her belly, the other hanging loose at her side, fingers twitching slightly with each pulse rising from below. Her skin glowed faintly, not with light but with heat, subtle waves distorting the air around her. The baby inside her rolled again, harder than before, as though responding to the presence beneath the earth, pushing against the confines of her body with desperate force. Mara clenched her teeth, a low sound escaping her throat, not pain, but effort, as if she were holding something back. Old Lila, clutching her chest and fighting for breath, forced herself to stand. Her knees shook and her eyes filled with terror, but her voice came out rough and broken. "Girl, you got to stop. You hear me? Whatever's listening down there, it ain't of the Lord. It ain't of nobody living." Mara turned her head slowly, and for a moment Lila wondered if she would see a stranger wearing the girl's face. But it was Mara, tired, frightened, resolute. "I didn't call it," she said softly. "It came the moment he tried to hurt me." Lila's lips parted. "Child, nothing comes without being called." Mara looked down at her belly. "It wasn't me." Her breathing hitched. "It was him." Before Lila could ask who she meant, the well screamed. It wasn't a voice. It was the shriek of ancient stone grinding against something vast and burning below it. The sound tore through the plantation like lightning trapped underground. Birds launched into the sky. Horses bucked in their stalls. Men fell to the ground, hands over their heads. Alden cried out as the porch railing splintered beneath his grip. Even the sky seemed to shudder. The well's stone rim cracked down the middle with a long, jagged line. Steam, white, searing, sulphurous, gushed out in a violent burst, whipping through the air like the breath of a furnace. The heat scorched the grass in a perfect ring around the well, reducing green blades to curling black threads. Alden shielded his face, eyes burning. "Mara, get back from it," he shouted, voice breaking with fear. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, she whispered something into the steam, a soft murmur that made the heat swirl toward her like a creature obeying a command. The steam rose, twisting upward, taking shape, not solid, not clear, but suggestive of a form that had no business existing in daylight. Long, thin shapes like arms extended and retracted. A hollow depression like a face swirled into place for a moment, then vanished. It was Smoke thinking, Smoke remembering. The master stared, trembling harder with each second. "This is witchcraft," he hissed. "This is devilwork. You'll be punished. I swear it, you'll hang for this." Mara's eyes locked with his, and her voice came out low, steady, frightening in its certainty. "You won't lay a hand on me." Alden opened his mouth to shout again, but his voice died when the well groaned, long, deep, and hungry. A wave of heat burst upward, scorching the wood of the nearest cabin. Flames did not appear, but the boards smoked instantly, popping and curling. Several people screamed and fled, stumbling over each other as they tried to escape the spreading ground heat. Mara stepped back from the well at last. The ground cooled immediately. The steam collapsed inward and vanished. The well went silent. Everyone stared, breathless, waiting for something else to happen, for another crack, another burst of heat, another whisper from the depths, but the world froze in a moment of terrible stillness. Then the baby kicked, hard, so hard Mara bent double, gasping. A sound like a muffled thud came from inside her, and the entire plantation felt it, the way one feels thunder through the soles of the feet. Lila rushed toward her, arms trembling, but Mara shook her head violently, eyes wide with terror now, terror deeper than anything she'd shown before. "No," she gasped. "Stay back." Her legs buckled. She collapsed to her knees. The earth beneath her shimmered again, pulsing with heat, one beat, then another, growing stronger, faster, sinking with the frantic movement inside her. Alden took a step back. The others watched in horror. Mara clutched her belly, breath broken, voice shaking as she whispered, "It's waking." And then the ground beneath her ripped open. The ground did not split with the force of an earthquake or the violence of an eruption. It opened slowly, deliberately, as if something beneath the soil had been waiting for the exact moment Mara fell to her knees. The dirt cracked in a perfect line beneath her, widening inch by inch, its edges trembling, small stones rolling into the growing darkness. A hot breath rose from below, thick, metallic, heavy with the scent of charred wood and something older, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. Mara screamed, a raw, strangled sound that tore through the air. Her hands clutched her belly so tightly her knuckles turned white. The baby inside twisted wildly, pressing so hard against her skin that the shape of a limb bulged unmistakably beneath the surface. Lila reached toward her, but the heat that burst upward forced her back, blistering the air around Mara like a living furnace. Everyone staggered away except Mara, trapped on her knees over the widening crack, her body trembling as if the force inside her was trying to wrench its way free. The master watched from a safe distance, his face contorted with a mix of horror, disbelief, and a dawning realization that he had lost control over something far greater than a plantation. "Get her up," Alden shouted, voice trembling. "Pull her away from it." But no one dared move closer. Even the strongest men held back, eyes wide, sweat dripping down their faces. The heat grew unbearable, curling the edges of the nearby grass into black ash that drifted upward like dark snow. Mara screamed again, louder this time, her voice twisting into something that didn't sound entirely human. The crack beneath her widened suddenly with a sickening snap, and a blast of steam rocketed upward, nearly lifting her off the ground. Her body jerked violently. Lila sobbed. "It's taking her," she whispered. "Oh God, it's taking her whole." Mara's breath came in ragged gasps. Tears streamed down her face, evaporating before they hit the ground. She tried to move, tried to drag herself away, but the dirt under her hands heated too quickly, scorching her palms. She collapsed forward with a cry. Then something answered from the deep. A low, resonant groan drifted up from the crack, vibrating through the air, rattling the bones of everyone who stood within 20 yards. It was a voice made of stone and fire and hunger. A voice that didn't speak words but intentions. And it recognized her. Mara's eyes shot open. The heat surged again. Her belly convulsed, rippling beneath her torn dress. One long, severe kick punched upward beneath her ribs, forcing her to cough out a wet, choking sound. "It's hurting her," one of the field hands shouted. "Help her." But the master, shaking so hard he could barely stand straight, yelled back, "No one goes near her. No one." The crack widened again. A flash of orange light flickered far below, as if fire moved somewhere deep beneath the earth. A thick, burning smell, like human flesh baked in a furnace, rose from the opening. Alden gagged. Several people turned away in horror. Lila didn't move. She stared at Mara with her hands pressed to her mouth, trembling uncontrollably. "This ain't natural birth," she whispered. "This ain't child's doing. This is Jonas's death come back for her." Mara screamed again, this time not in pain but in pure terror. "Stop," she cried. "Stop. Please, stop." Her voice cracked. The baby kicked again, stronger, so strong her entire stomach shifted violently to one side. The ground beneath her pulsed in response. The crack widened to the width of her body. Heat poured out like a beating heart, thudding upward in thick, suffocating waves. Then something shifted inside the crack. Not a hand, not a creature, a ripple, like the surface of boiling water. The light below flared brighter. A rush of steam blasted upward, nearly knocking Mara backward. She clung to the dirt, sobbing, barely able to breathe. And then the impossible happened. The heat bent toward her belly. Every person watching felt it, like invisible hands reaching from beneath the earth, grasping, pulling, calling to the child within her. Mara choked on her own breath. "It wants him," she gasped. "It wants my baby." The crack shuddered violently, stones rattling, dirt tumbling inward, the light below pulsing faster and faster like frantic breath. The air throbbed with burning pressure. The world narrowed to Mara, the well, and the crack beneath her. A final, brutal kick pressed upward from inside her. Her back arched, her scream broke the sky, and the crack beneath her exploded with blinding red light. The shockwave ripped outward, knocking everyone to the ground. Dust shot into the air in a thick column, swirling like a tornado of heat. When it cleared, Mara was gone. No blood, no body, no trace, only the scorched outline of where her knees had touched the ground. And from the crack, now glowing faintly, a soft, rhythmic sound drifted upward. A heartbeat, not hers, not human, something born in fire, something waking. Say part 6 when you want the next part. The storm that had rolled over the plantation earlier left the air trembling with a strange heaviness, as if the sky itself remembered what had happened the night Elias burned. The mansion, empty, rotting, but still alive with the memories of screaming wood and cracking fire, seemed to lean closer to the earth as Part 6 began. Sarah had not slept since that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elias standing inside the flames, yet smiling. Not screaming, not begging, just smiling, as if fire was not destroying him but releasing him into something larger, something older. Something hungry. By the time dawn painted the broken windows with pale light, strange things had already begun. The first sign was the tobacco fields. Overnight, they had grown taller, not just taller but twisted, as if a giant hand had grabbed the stalks and stretched them. The overseer who went to inspect them at sunrise came sprinting back toward the mansion, stumbling, white-faced. "They whisper," he gasped. "The stalks whisper at you. They sound like his voice." The others laughed, thinking he had drunk too much molasses gin. But later, when two more workers returned shaking for no reason they could explain, nobody laughed again. Then, at noon, the ashes. The wind blew in from the east, carrying a thin gray snow that drifted like the remains of a long-dead forest. Only it wasn't forest ash. Sarah knew the scent instantly. It was human ash, the same smell that had haunted her for days. She stepped out into the yard, one hand on her belly, the other shielding her eyes. The ash collected gently around her feet like something greeting her, or bowing. Behind her, the mansion creaked. Not the normal old wood groan but a deliberate sound, as if someone heavy was walking across the upstairs hallway. But the second floor had collapsed years ago. No one could be up there. No one living. By dusk, the whispering began, not from fields, not from the wind, not from any person. From the mansion itself. It came like a long exhale leaking through the cracks between the boards. Sarah. Her blood froze. The voice was wrong, burned, shredded, scraped raw, but she knew it. Elias. She stepped backward slowly, her breath shaking, her hand pressed hard against her belly as if shielding the child from the voice. "You aren't them," the voice hissed through the walls. "Now, they will burn too." Sarah could not run. Her feet refused to move. The sound circled her like a beast testing the strength of a cage. "Elias, what do you want?" she forced out. The whisper twisted into a laugh, low, broken, echoing from everywhere at once. "Justice." The front door swung open on its own. The house inhaled deeply, boards expanding, a long breathing sound rolling through its ribs. Then Sarah saw it, just inside the doorway. A footprint burned into the wooden floor. Fresh, smoking, as if someone flaming had taken a single step, and was waiting to take another. Night fell suddenly, violently, without a sunset. The last thing Sarah heard before the darkness swallowed the yard was a promise spoken from the doorway. "Touch me again and die, now it is their turn." To be continued. Night spread over the plantation like a curtain dipped in ink, heavy and absolute. No lantern could cut through it. No moonlight bled through it. It was as if the sky itself had shut its eyes. Sarah stood frozen at the mansion's threshold, staring at the single burning footprint on the floorboards. Smoke curled from its edges like fingers beckoning her forward. Behind her, the wind died. Even the insects fell silent. The world waited. She took a shaky breath, clutching her swollen belly, and whispered into the darkness, "Elias, if this is you, tell me what you want." The house answered with creaking ribs, wood shifting in long groans as if rising from a deep sleep. Then another footprint appeared, right in front of the first one. It formed slowly, the wood blistering, glowing red, then settling into a perfect charred print. Step by step, something unseen walked deeper into the mansion. Sarah shook her head, stepping back. No, no, not again. But the door slammed shut behind her with a thunder that echoed across the empty fields. The windows rattled, dust rained from the rafters. And the whispering began again, soft, layered, as if hundreds of burnt voices spoke together. "Come see." The air cooled so suddenly her breath fogged. She felt the cold pass straight through her belly as if something unseen brushed against her unborn child. The baby kicked, violently, as though sensing danger Sarah could not yet see. She forced herself to take one step inside. The scent of ash wrapped around her like a cloak. Shadows dripped down the walls, moving as though alive. What had once been a grand hallway was now a corridor of blackened wood, every surface scarred by a fire that hadn't touched the outside world. But the fire that burned Elias had burned here, too, after his death. The house remembered. The house repeated. Another footprint appeared ahead, then another, then a trail of them, leading toward the grand staircase, now broken, half collapsed, splintered like the ribs of a giant beast. Sarah's legs trembled, but she followed. She had to. Every pregnant instinct screamed that whatever Elias had become was tangled with the fate of her child. When she reached the base of the staircase, the boards above groaned. Something stepped across the broken landing. She could see the weight of it in how the wood bowed. But she saw nothing, just footprints, slow, deliberate, tracking across the upper floor that should not have been able to hold a living thing. The whisper came again, burning the air. They touched you, now I will touch them. A sudden crash shook the house, heavy, final. One of the field overseers screamed from outside. Sarah spun toward the window just in time to see a glow rising in the dark, a human-shaped glow, moving across the yard toward the barns. Elias, on fire, walking, hunting. Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth to smother the scream, because she realized something horrible. He wasn't coming for her. Not yet. He was going after every man who had ever laid a hand on her. Elias, stop, she whispered, but the wall swallowed her voice whole. Outside, another scream tore across the plantation, this one shorter, cut off too quickly. Ash drifted from the ceiling. The baby kicked again, harder. The mansion whispered one final message. Stay inside, Sarah, you must not see what comes next. The mansion breathed around Sarah like a living creature, long, cold inhalations that pulled at her hair and skirt, followed by slow exhalations that carried the scent of charred earth. The walls trembled faintly, reacting to every distant scream coming from the fields. Elias was no longer a man. He was a consequence. Sarah backed away from the window, her hands trembling, her belly tightening with each echo that reached the house. The baby kicked again, sharp, frantic, almost as if it sensed something approaching from far beyond the human world. A low hum filled the hallway. Not mechanical, not natural, a vibration, like the deep rumble of a chant spoken beneath the floorboards. The candles she had lit earlier flickered one by one, surrendering to the cold until darkness swallowed the room. Then she felt it, a presence behind her, not footsteps, not breath, just heat, a soft wave of warmth against her back, like standing too close to a dying fire. Elias, she whispered without turning. The warmth vanished. In its place came a whisper so faint she wasn't sure it came from this world. Don't turn around. Sarah froze. Her heart slammed into her ribs. Her hands clutched her belly. Her breath shook. Everything in her screamed to look. Humans always look, but something ancient in that whisper pulled her still. The house groaned. A stair creaked upstairs, then another, then another. Something was descending the ruined staircase above her, step by step. The sound was slow, deliberate, wrong. She squeezed her eyes shut. The whisper returned, this time brushing the back of her neck like smoke. You must not see me yet. A tremor rippled through the entire mansion. Dust fell, boards flexed. The front door rattled on its hinges as if pushed by invisible hands. Outside, another scream rose, distant, desperate, then choked into silence. Sarah couldn't breathe. Why are you doing this? She whispered. The presence moved around her, not touching, but circling, like fire swirling in the shape of a man. They hurt you, the whisper answered. They would have hurt him too. Her hand pressed instinctively against her unborn child. Elias continued, I will cleanse this place. Every hand that struck you, every voice that cursed you, every man who thought he owned you, they belong to the fire now. Sarah shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. Justice doesn't wait to be asked, the voice replied. Then the burning footprints reappeared, this time forming behind her, one at a time, marching through the hallway toward the open door. Each print smoked, glowed, then dimmed into ash. Elias was leaving, hunting the next one. Sarah finally dared to open her eyes. The hallway was empty, only a trail of blackened prints leading toward the yard. Then the floor trembled beneath her feet. Not from Elias, from something still inside the mansion. Something that had awakened when Elias did. Sarah's blood ran cold. The house whispered again, but this time, it wasn't Elias's voice. It was older, hungrier, and it said only one thing. He is not the only one who remembers. The mansion fell into a silence so deep it felt carved from stone. Sarah stood in the center of the hallway, staring at the last burned footprint fading into ash. Elias was gone, for now, but something else remained. Something that had been waiting far longer than he had. The air thickened, pressing against her chest like a heavy hand. The house groaned, slow, stretching, as if waking up after 100-year sleep. Sarah backed toward the wall, clutching her belly. Elias, are you still here? No answer, only darkness shifting at the far end of the corridor. The shadows there were wrong. Not still, not natural. They moved like a swarm of insects crawling over invisible skin. Sarah felt her breath catch as the darkness stretched toward her, slow, deliberate, studying her. A voice rose inside the walls, deep and ancient, vibrating the floorboards under her feet. He burned, but I slept. Sarah froze. The voice was nothing like Elias. It came from every direction at once, above her, beneath her, inside the walls, inside the very bones of the house. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the railing, spreading like veins across the banister. The house inhaled again, a long cold breath that made Sarah's knees weaken. You walk with the child of flame, the voice whispered. Sarah's heart stopped. My child. A rumble of laughter shook the ceiling, dust falling in a soft gray rain around her. Not his, not theirs. The house marked you long before he burned. Sarah shook her head violently. No, Elias. He was the father. The darkness pulsed. He is only the spark. Her belly tightened, painful, sudden, like something inside pressed back against the world. She staggered, leaning against the wall as the old house creaked with amusement. You felt it even then, the voice whispered. The dreams, the heat in your sleep, the footsteps that followed you before Elias ever touched this land. Sarah's breath trembled. She had dreamed, for months before the pregnancy, nightmares of someone standing in the corner of her cabin, watching, waiting, breathing without lungs, but she had told no one. No one except, her eyes widened, the midwife, the old woman who refused to deliver the baby on plantation grounds. Who said the mansion was listening? Who left in the night and never returned? Sarah whispered, "What are you?" The shadows quivered, spreading across the ceiling like ink in water. The boards above bulged downward, as if something massive leaned its weight against them from the other side. The first master built his home over my ribs, the voice answered. And every soul buried here fed me. Fire woke him, but fear wakes me. The house inhaled again, this time pulling Sarah one step forward without touching her. She dug her heels into the floor, fighting against an invisible force. The voice lowered, curling close to her ear though nothing stood there. Do not fear Elias. The walls bent inward slightly. Fear what is in your womb. Sarah gasped. A sharp, tearing pain rippled through her stomach. The baby twisted, violently, more movement than she had ever felt. She cried out, falling to her knees. The house shuddered with satisfaction. Outside, far away in the fields, she heard Elias's burning voice scream, rage or warning, she couldn't tell. The mansion whispered one final truth that broke her. He kills for you. The shadows swelled, but I live in you. The mansion shook as if something enormous had placed its hands on the roof and pressed down. Dust rained from the rafters. Cracks split along the walls like lightning frozen in wood. Sarah clutched her belly, gasping as another violent twist rippled through it. Outside, the glow of Elias moved through the fields, flaring, dimming, roaring back to life. His voice echoed across the land like a burning storm. Sarah, run! But she could not move. The mansion wasn't letting her. The ancient voice rose again, calm and vast and hungry. You carry more than a child. You carry a doorway. Sarah shook her head wildly. No, no, this is my baby, Elias's baby. The shadows on the ceiling pulsed like a giant heartbeat. Elias's flame. Flames burn bright, and die. But what grows inside you is older than fire. Her breath caught. Her whole body shivered. The temperature dropped so sharply frost formed across the floor in a spiderweb of white. My baby, she whispered, as innocent. Innocence lasts only until the first scream, the house said. With a violent crack, a long dark fissure tore down the hallway wall, opening like a mouth. Cold air poured out of it, smelling of damp stone and earth long sealed away. From deep inside that crack came a faint whisper. Small, soft, new, a baby's coo. Sarah choked on a sob, stumbling backward. No, 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 my child isn't yours. The ancient voice laughed, a slow, shaking rumble that made the floor ripple beneath her knees. She already knows my name. Suddenly the air brightened, an orange flare bursting through every shattered window. Elias's burning form appeared at the door, flames licking the frame but not consuming it. He stepped inside. The house screamed. Every board twisted in agony. Every window shattered outward. The shadows recoiled as Elias's fire illuminated the hall. His figure flickered, unstable, barely holding the shape of a man, but his voice thundered. "Let her go." The mansion responded, with a roar that shook the earth. The fissure widened, shadows spiraling up the walls and reaching for Sarah-like claws. Elias lunged forward, his burning footprints scorching the floor. Sarah felt herself being dragged toward the crack, her heels scraping the floor, her fingernails splitting as she clawed at the boards. Her belly tightened like iron, pain ripping through her as the thing inside twisted again. Elias reached her. For a moment, just one, she saw his face through the flames. Eyes she remembered, hands she had held, hands now burning. He pulled her into his arms. She felt no pain, only heat, like a sun passing close. "Sarah," he whispered, "hold on to me." The shadows swarmed. The crack widened. The ancient voice bellowed, "She is mine." Elias roared back, exploding in a blinding wave of fire that filled the entire mansion. The heat was not destructive, it was cleansing, holy in its fury. The shadows shrieked, melting back into the walls. The crack sealed like a wound in reverse. Sarah collapsed against him as the house shook violently, beams collapsing, the roof buckling. Elias held her tighter. "You and the child," he whispered, "are not his." For the first time, the mansion seemed afraid. Outside, the storm broke. Rain slammed against the ruins. Thunder rolled across the sky like a judgment. The floor gave way. The mansion fell. Fire and rain swallowed everything. When Sarah opened her eyes, she lay in the grassy yard, the storm fading. Elias was gone. Only a faint trail of smoking footprints led into the night, until they vanished altogether. Her belly was still, quiet, peaceful. She placed a trembling hand over it and whispered, "We are free." But the wind carried back a final echo from the smoldering ruins.